I think a straight yes or no answer will suffice. Andre.
I don't think that a straight yes or no answer will suffice. I don't think that we are making cuts wholesale. I think we're being very careful about the reductions that we're making in spending. And I think that the way in which we're going about that is in a very measured fashion, because, as you know, if we were to go too wholesale on making cuts, that means an impact onto the public services that we would hope to be able to deliver, and in fact on the employment in the Isle of Man. So there are a number of measures that we're taking, but I believe that we're taking them in a very careful, considered way.
Great, thank you very much. Peter, Karen, how do you answer that?
The situation is that there are needs for cuts. When we had a budget, as the only one that voted against it with the Liberal Party, the situation is that we spent roughly about 200 million more than that came in. We've got massive liabilities, and I must say that the Treasury Minister at least came clean about the liabilities we've got as far as the public sector debt is concerned. And one of the important things is that we do need to bring about the cuts, but we need to make sure they're effective cuts in the right places, not on frontline services, not hitting the little people. And the concern I have is that it is actually happening, and we're not addressing the real issue because of the lack of the political audit and accountability that we presently have under the ministerial system.
So where would you like to see cuts made?
Well, what I would like to see cuts made, I think the situation has to be is on the upper management. I think what we've got to do is we've got to look at the way we address the whole running of government at the present time.
Okay, Chris Holmes.
Well, I have to be honest, I think that some of the cuts, certainly from what I've seen in Anchorage's budget, were quite fair and certainly deserved. But I do agree to some extent with Peter and what he's saying. There are areas of upper management which could be cut. One of the questions I'm going to come on to later is the amount of MHKs, and I think that's possibly an area where savings could be made. So I have to say that as fair as the cuts have been, I have to agree with Peter in that upper management, it should be one of the areas certainly to be cut.
And one of the reasons why that is because of the fact that the civil service have far too much policy-making decision as far as this government's concerned, and that's why we've seen the cuts further down the pecking order. And I think the fact is, when you look at what we've got, you look at the FSC and the 5 layers of management that are in the FSC, and many of these things need to be addressed now.
I have to take exception to that, because I do think that Peter is making some emotive comments there. We do have different purposes for our civil servants, for our public servants, and it doesn't matter whether it's at the higher level or the lower level. Cuts are being made, or at least reductions are being made, right across the board. And I think it's unfortunate that Peter would choose to separate different types of workers that we have in government, when in fact everybody is making a valid contribution.
But the reality is, Chairman, is the fact that, of course, with cutting the ones at the bottom, you get 3 or 4 redundancies for the price of one upper management.
Okay, I'd like to take some points from our audience. If anyone has anything to say, please raise your hand. Chris Hall, how would you answer the question? Is the Manx government making cuts in the right places?
I think the first thing we have to recognise is the government has got some incredibly difficult challenges. If you look what's happening in Ireland, look what's happening across the water in the UK, these are unprecedented tough times. So I think the government's to be congratulated that it's recognised we've got problems. I do have sympathies with the government because 70,000 people on the island all have different priorities and different ideas. I think it's good that some decisions be made. But I also think, well, I would congratulate the government. It's not just all about cuts. There is investment too. So I think one of the really important things which has come out of this government is the investing in the capital programme. That is really important for the economy. So yes, there might be little things I would disagree with, but at the end of the day, I think the big picture thing is we're not being complacent and we are making an attempt to balance the budget. So overall, I'm very pleased with that.
Okay.
I think there's an issue that we've sort of not gone through, which is when the report on the scope and structure of government was introduced in about 2006, that came along, and eventually we've got a change in the structure of government, but nothing on the scope of government. And we've had incidents where we know that the airports, the manager of the airport say they could run that much more efficiently if it wasn't part of the government, that if it was privatised, I suppose. We've got subsidised MEA shops. It's subsidised to sell fridges and things like that to people. That seems a bit bonkers, especially when you've got ordinary private sector companies doing exactly the same job. There are things in the scope of government that I think that it just hasn't been addressed. As for the structure, we started with 9 departments, we ended up with 9 departments. Nothing really radically changed in that, and I think that actually a lot of the big issues are being ducked.
Okay,
I think you're right.
Yes.
Andrew Shipley, please.
I think at the moment we've not had a debate yet on what the population actually wants from government in terms of where we're going in the future. What services does government actually need to deliver for us? And I think with it being an election year, this is an ideal opportunity for the politicians to actually set out the stalls and say, yes, this is where we need to go as a government. Hopefully, big business will come in and pick up the pieces. The concern I have, and I have to congratulate the government because taking a bigger picture and looking at what's happening in England, I think a steady course has been ploughed by the Manx government in terms of not making the radical cuts as we've seen the English government doing. But I have a real concern. Education, for example, this year I believe had a 3% cut or thereabouts. Now the problem is that when you actually apply that to a particular government department, what it means is that you've got that 3% has got to come out of any spare cash that you've got, apart from the money that's available for staffing. For schools, some of them are up to 90%. 90% of their budget is based on staffing, which leaves 10% which is available to be used. If you start cutting that 3% has got to come out of that 10%, which effectively is multiplying it by 30%. The inevitability of that is that you're going to look at redundancies potentially.
Okay, thank you. Serina.
I just think we need to be realistic. If cuts need to be made, cuts need to be made. It's not going to please everyone. Someone's going to be unhappy somewhere along the line. I agree with Andrew. I think there should possibly be some sort of questionnaire or something to see what people actually want. There probably are services on the Isle of Man that people don't want, don't need. There's others that people do want improving and do want more of.
Okay, thank you. Peter, Karen, you were quite opposed to the budget. Is there anywhere specifically you would like to see cuts made?
Well, I think the point is what you've got to remember is the fact that the reason we had such a budget was because there's going to be a general election in September.
Oh, that's
and what I'm
nonsense.
concerned about is I think people need to know the full fiscal headaches that are coming over the horizon. By all means, we need to be positive. We need to try and keep confidence going in the economy, but we also need to have realism as far as what needs to be addressed. Many of the issues haven't been addressed because we've developed the Council of Ministers legislation and it's become far too cosy. There isn't the order. Many of the issues that you're going to have to face as the next generation, like the public sector, pension debt, is going to be, it's £2 billion now, it's going to be £6 billion within another 20 years. Yeah, I might be up the borough, but you will have to foot that bill, and that's why these things need to be addressed now.
Can I interrupt there?
Mrs. Crane first, sorry.
Yeah, I would just like to say that I think that what Peter's talking about, this being an easy budget, is politicking tosh, quite honestly, because come September, when there is a general election, it will be those who have put their heads on the line and voted for this budget, not those who have evaded voting for the budget, who ought to be supported in this. It's very easy not to support a budget. It's very easy to walk away from responsibilities. What you have to do is own up to those responsibilities and take a share in them.
And well, I would like to say that. I would like to
Peter, if you can respond, then Ms. Chipper, come to you.
What I would like to say to that is the reality is being responsible, actually exposing public sector pension liability, the being responsible about the fact of the way that we have the capital projects deficiency as far as the capital account is concerned. This budget actually spent nearly 200 million more than that came in. That's not sustainable. The reality is, I'm being straight with people. The fact of the matter is, when we had the budget, I think I was the only one that wasn't actually a member of a department of the government that made the budget. That's the reason why I voted. That's the reason why I'm free to vote is the way I am. And that is the reason why we've got to change the political system. And that's why we brought the Liberal Vannon Party into existence, to try and bring about the audit. Remember the crazy things we've had over the years where we spent something in the region of 130 million on a power station that was worth 40 million, should have cost us 40 million. Many of these
Peter,
things
I'm going to have to cut you off
needs to be sorted
for
out.
time reasons. Andrew Shipley.
Well, just to come back on the pensions issue, at the moment there is a programme underway whereby the government is actually looking at reforming pensions and looking to introduce a
And it
unified
does nothing
pension
about the
scheme.
long-term liability.
Peter, please.
But the long-term liabilities are over 40, 50 years. You wouldn't expect to have to pay the pension liabilities off in one go. And by taking a sensible approach to pensions and actually addressing the issues at this stage, you put in place measures to actually reduce the liabilities over the term of that of the person's life.
That's what
Okay, I'd like to take a point from the audience. We have a gentleman in the 5th row, his hand up.
I'd just like to go back to a point that both Serina and Andrew made, that we should do some sort of referendum to see what people want to do. But Chris Hall made a very good point. There's 70,000 people on the Isle of Man, and we're all going to have different priorities. So how do you know what to cut?
Okay, Chris Hall, you.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to something Peter said, because it's obviously great we have scrutiny and it's great we have a democracy and debate, but did Liberal Vannon actually put forward a counter budget? So is there something we could see the way Liberal Vannon would have done it, so we could compare with what went forward and see how you would balance the budget?
Well, the situation was, of course, you've got to remember that when Tony Brown stands up, he's got, 4 or 5 secretaries, whole floor of officers to do so. The reality is, we'd have started with the public sector pension liability. Final salary pensions should have been stopped years ago. That's the reality. That's not being popular. That's being responsible to you, the next generation. If I'd have had my way, including, I'm the one that started the 5% for MHKs to pay into a pension scheme with everybody else. That was our proposal. But the point is, as the years go on, the hole gets bigger, and the more pressure it leaves, the more debt and more liabilities left to your next
So why are you criticising when
generation.
government is doing something?
Yeah, and it's woefully inadequate as well, isn't it, Mrs. Green?
And I don't believe it is woefully inadequate.
Well, I think
it
you'll
will
find that
address the
out.
problem.
These people
I think
will
what
find
we're
that out.
doing is responsible for this next generation.
Well,
We're
you're
not
not.
going to have to bear
You're
the
totally
ills of
irresponsible.
previous
Right, if you could
government.
please not talk over each other all night long. Any of the other panellists got anything to add on this particular question before we move on?
I think them two have covered it.
I think it has been covered. Okay, moving on to our second question. A question on tuition fees.
Is it right for the government to continue to pay tuition fees for some students when imposing budget cuts across all the other departments?
Andrew Shipley.
Right. Yes, I think it is important that we actually invest in the future. Our next generation are going to be our politicians, our leaders of industry, and therefore it's vitally important that we actually prepare for the future. And I think students over on the Isle of Man are extremely fortunate. I was in contact with a friend from university, and I was extremely fortunate that I actually had a full grant. And those were the halcyon days, I think, and I had an opportunity which would never have occurred for someone from my background. I think what we've got in the island, all credit to the Manx government for actually trying to maintain the fees and pay the fees for students that go across.
Okay, if I just take a point from the lady with a hand up there, please.
Yeah, I just want to say, are you going to continue doing that? This is probably for Anne.
Yes, I think that
do you feel that you're going to continue to pay, as parent here this evening, do you feel that you're going to continue paying the fees?
I think that the Isle of Man government regards this very much as a jewel in the crown, and it would be something that we would lose at last resort because we value it so much. We understand the value of what we can offer to young people. I know sometimes there comes in the criticism that or those young people who go to university don't come back to the Isle of Man. the problem there is, of course, if they did, we couldn't employ them all anyway. I think what we have to do is be prepared to give them the very best start in life that we can.
And a lot of us do come back to the Isle of Man, eventually.
Yes, some do.
We do,
But, but unfortunately, we haven't got quite all the opportunities to bring them all back yet. But I think that if those who don't come back and don't have the opportunities to come back are still first-class ambassadors for us.
So as a parent here this evening, there's lots of parents here, we feel like we will still get support from the government.
As long as we possibly can, I think that we will try to do so.
Good, thank you.
Serina Luff, I understand you have aspirations to go to university. What do you think?
Yeah, as a university student, I definitely want you to keep continuing, you know, giving these grants.
You're not a university
But I'm
student
hoping
yet.
to go to university student, hopefully. But I think what you should probably try to look into is maybe expanding the amount of courses that are for degrees over here, maybe expanding the college or the business school, because you could really supply a lot of students with courses over here. We don't need to go to the UK, you could do it over here. And that could save a lot of money in the long run.
Richard Butt, as a returning graduate.
Yes, I think, thank goodness you're not English, really. And great for the Isle of Man to be able to do that. I think when Tony Blair and John Major's government decided in England they were going to expand education, they did this with great amount of effort and so on, and expanded all the universities. My university, Birmingham University, I was there, had 9,000 students when I was there in the mid-80s. It's now 24,500, and there's loads more universities. And they didn't think, hang on a second, how are we going to pay for this eventually? And that's what the key problem was, I think, in the UK. Thank goodness the Isle of Man can carry on doing that. I hope it carries on forever. I think it's quite sensible to have the minimum grades, though, to actually go to university, because I think that does show some sort of extra responsibility as well.
Chris Hall is one of the largest employers in the island, presumably in the market for graduate employees.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. And as an island, we have no natural resources. Our future success relies on the entrepreneurial spirit and the brain power and the ability to basically run faster than our competitors. So it is a vital, vital thing we do. The only 2 points I would make is degrees are important, but they're not the only answer. Certainly in my world, the IT and telecoms world, it's actually, there's much better career paths, perhaps a bit more vocational, coming out to work, taking professional qualifications. So yes, we certainly need a lot of well-educated people who go for first degree, but do think about more sandwich courses perhaps, and do think that about lifelong learning. Nowadays it's not about going at 20, getting a degree, and then never training again. And then a second point I just wanted to make, I absolutely agree that there's a chance to invest more on the island. It goes back to how do we prioritise resources. My personal view, and as a father of 3 children, I've got to be careful what I say here, but I think actually it should be a little bit more focused on who should pay, and the budget should be a little bit more focused on those who need it. So in other words, if you're a top-rate taxpayer, then perhaps you should contribute a little bit more to the university education, but please keep supporting it.
Chris Holmes is another aspiring university student.
Yes, well, I like everyone else, think that this is a great idea, and hopefully you'll pay for my university education fees or willingly. Yes. And I again like the idea of imposing the grade boundaries on you having to require certain grades to apply for this, because it does. Well, I hate to say it's act as a motivating factor, but you can't send everyone to university. You have to. It's a very expensive thing for the Isle of Man government, but it's brilliant that they can do it. And I think even reduction in the number of students who get this, it should still be continued indefinitely for as many people as it possibly can be.
Peter Carrot, and I'll come to the audience.
Well, as the one of the members on the department when the Brits brought this in the first place, I was delighted that we managed to get the government to realise the principle that the poorest child from the poorest family can go to university. I agree with what Richard had said about the issue of the problem the Brits did was they tried to turn universities into a facility to mop up unemployment, youth unemployment, and that's where they went wrong. And that's why I agree with my colleague here on the issue of the fact of putting the rates of qualifications up in order to do so. I think this is an issue that we must make sure your generation are going to be the generation that's going to have to keep the social accessibility so that you improve it for the next generation. My big worry for the next generation is making sure that the social mobility for all our citizens, rich or poor, can achieve their maximum. And that's going to be the big issue that we're going to have to address. And that's why we're going to need responsible budgeting in the future.
The gentleman with his hand up just there.
I'd just like to ask a question to the panel about how we shoehorn, and I agree totally with the student fees and stuff like that for universities. With time being hard, do we not think we should be encouraging more manual skills within the island and supporting that more? And then keeping the young people here that don't want to go to university, that have qualifications, and helping employers to be able to support apprenticeships and skills that we need on the island.
Speaking as an employer, speaking as an employer, I think you are absolutely right. The Isle of Man College here is a little jewel in our crown. It does a fantastic job, and you know, at the end of the day, you can't have too many chiefs and no Indians. In a business, you need people of all skills. I also think that's where the business school comes in. Again, in the business community, we don't necessarily want people to go away on one-year-long courses. We want people to study for 2 or 3 hours in the evening. So the certificates in marketing, diplomas in management are all absolutely fantastic. And I think as an island, we're very, very lucky that so many people take up those opportunities at the college or the business school, and we should continue to encourage that and give them even more chance to expand the portfolio.
The lady with the blonde hair down here, and then we'll come to the gentleman in the front row.
I'm a returning graduate to the island, and I was very disappointed to find that there aren't many graduate schemes within government itself. Given that you're making budget cuts and cutting jobs within government, so thereby recognising that you are overpaying staff or staff are being overpaid for what they're doing, would it not be more convenient and sensible to have more graduate programmes within the government itself?
I think that's directed at you.
That's been directed to me. I'm not aware of what graduate schemes there are available across government actually at the moment.
Barely any.
Right. I know that when I was Minister for Education, we worked very closely with some of the businesses in the private sector to try and encourage graduate schemes. It is an area that is difficult. I think that it's also difficult for government to create these positions and opportunities at a time when we are making reductions, but I do take the point that there should still be that avenue for returners to be able to consider. And we do want the brightest and best in our civil service.
Okay, thank you. And the gentleman down here in the front row.
Just a question to Mrs. Gray. We've been talking about the government's funding for students to go and be educated at university. I was just wanting to know if the government had any plans of altering any benefits or grants for students for issues such as accommodation, which is another problem for students from the Isle of Man, as expenses are similar, they can go higher. I was just wondering if there were any changes there.
Of course, those structures come from within the Department of Education itself. As far as I know, I don't know what plans they have for the future to be able to improve the maintenance award, which is really what you're talking about, for those young people who are whose parents are on low incomes. I know that it was something that I was very worried about when I was in the Department of Education, but we didn't at that time have the means to be able to improve the maintenance award. I think it's something that has probably been left too long now and will need revision. I think it's really important that we are able to offer all young people equal opportunities to go to university, if they should so choose. That's not to decry what's happening in the Isle of Man. But those who can qualify to go shouldn't be disadvantaged by means of not being able to afford to.
And we'll take one final point from a gentleman at the top.
I'm just going to refer back to what Mr. Hall said about testing for uni fees, which I totally agree with. Why should someone who's on a lower wage should still actually get it for free? But then why should someone who's a higher rate taxpayer still get it for free when they could perfectly pay for it? That's my question to the panel.
Anyone want to answer it?
Well, the fact is that, of course, the grant system depends on income. The tuition fees is about a fundamental principle, and the danger is if you start means testing, That's the danger, that the ante goes further and further down. And obviously I have to agree with Mrs. Crane about graduates. I haven't a clue as far as the situation on that, and I believe politics needs to be straight with people. But the gentleman who was on about the apprenticeships, I've tried several times, because government provides 70% of the money spent in the construction industry, that we should be making it part of the condition that responsible contractors have to take on apprentices, shouldn't be a financial liability. We've got to create that environment. I'm a joiner by trade. We've just written to the Employers Federation just the other day about this issue, because we've got to try and get a positive discrimination so that people can get them trades. Because if I was leaving school today, I wouldn't be allowed to be a tradesman, because the fact is I wouldn't have the qualifications. And that's wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our third question now. Andrew Hill, please.
For such a small island, do we have too many MHKs?
Richard Butts, presumably these MHKs keep you in some form of employment, so...
In some way. I think actually quantity is not the big issue here. We have got, our MHKs are not a local council, they are actually doing, preparing and writing and passing laws which we have to obey and which govern our lives and so on. I think that that needs scrutiny, and I think that we do need a lot of people to do that. It's 650 people in the UK will be doing the same sort of job as scrutiny. There's 24 here plus the MLC. I think quality is probably the bigger question, and well, how do you solve that? Also, structure of politics and culture and politics here. There are also other big questions here, and Peter will talk about having a party system and things like that, and ultimately. We don't know what we're getting when we elect our MHKs, because it's, as I think Steve Oden described it, as a blind date with the electorate. We don't know who the chief minister is going to be. We don't know what policy is going to come out of that, and so that's a difficulty. And then in terms of other things, I think the quality of issues that actually get raised in the Keys are sometimes baffling. The bus timetable in Williston takes up a lot of time in the House of Keys. And there must be a better place to do that. It undermines the Keys, it undermines people's respect for Manx politics when that sort of thing is continually raised in the House, in Tynwald, and there must be a better format for that, or members who understand that this is not really an appropriate forum in which to raise it.
Serina Luff.
I don't think the number of MHKs is the problem. I think the amount of diversity within them. I believe you're the only female MHK on the island.
Two.
Oh, two. There's only two female
MHKs, one registered council.
There's only two females, which I don't really think is a fair representative of society, and I don't think there's any ethnic minorities either. And also, I think...
Thanks, people.
I think the problem is their MLCs, they're unelected, which is quite undemocratic. I mean, the UK was going to reform the House of Lords, and we were going to do the same thing with the MLCs at the same time, but they stopped it, so we stopped it. I think we should just, do something ourselves for a change and try to become really democratic, truly.
Chris Hall.
Yeah, I must admit, it's not something I lie awake worrying about at night. But I think I am on the same page as Richard here. Quality is very, very important. In the business community, when businessmen get together, you'll hear them grumbling about the quality of MHKs. But then put your money where your mouth is, you're going to stand at the next election, and 100% of them will run out of the room and will not go near it. So I think, actually, in my role, I get to meet a lot of the MHKs, and I've had a lot of admiration. It's a very, very, very tough job. I think here we have probably the ultimate democracy in the world. When I used to live across in North Croydon constituency, which had 80,000 voters, I wouldn't have a clue who my MP was, and I wouldn't know what he looked like if he walked down the street. Here, obviously, we have the numbers in the telephone book. They are incredibly accessible, so we actually have fantastic democracy here. So I actually think the numbers are about right, and I admire the roles they do.
The gentleman there, just had his hand up.
Going back to a point made about the lack of women MHKs or ethnic minorities, surely it should be up to the females or the ethnic minorities wanting to stand to be in MHK instead of just forcing them into the... Sure, it shouldn't matter whether they're a man or a woman, whether they're white or black. Surely if they want to do the job, it shouldn't matter what their characteristics are.
Serina,
I think the thing is, what's wonderful in the 25 years I've been in there, when I went in there, I was the average age of the average member's grandchild, being a 24-year-old. The situation is that we have got the ability now for working people to be in there. The problem we've got is, like Chris says, there's very few people who would take the sort of hassle and, in many cases, the responsibility for the pay cut for doing the job. I think the situation is that there isn't too many MHKs. The problem you've got is the fact that you need a proper structure. And when they say they have no idea who's going to be the next Chief Minister, boy, I was telling my constituents who was going to be the next Chief Minister at the last general election. Because if you're in, you know what's going to happen. The point is, it's about transparency and allowing you to actually know and have some control over your parliament.
Yes, Anne-Craig.
Thank you. Can I just go back on the question about women MHKs? In fact, I think it was 1931 when Marion Shimon was the first elected female MHK, and there haven't been a great number since. But what I would have to say is that it isn't for everybody, and I really admire Serina actually, because I've got great hopes for her in the future. But I think what we have to accept though in the Isle of Man is that without a party system there can be no positive discrimination. And actually I don't believe in positive discrimination. I think that when I talk to MPs across, and they are female MPs, and they tell me that they have been given that advantage through their party system, I actually feel quite sorry for them, because to me that demeans their position. It means that they haven't been able to go in on a level playing field. And I think whatever your views, your ethnicity or anything else, you should be able to come in on your own merits. And
Serina, do you want to come back to the point which was made?
Well, yeah, I agree that single female-only lists that they've got to elect members into MPs, I think that's completely wrong. So that's not fair at all. I just thought it was quite an interesting point that there is only 2 female MHKs and the rest of them are, no offence, middle-aged, grey men.
I'd like to bring now 2 panellists, and I'll come back to the audience. So Andrew Shipley, please.
I was going to say probably ladies have more sense than to go into politics, but okay. I would agree absolutely that positive discrimination I don't think is the way forward. As a union we don't encourage it. People should get there on their own merits, we believe. The point was made about quality, not quantity. I think that's right. And democracy can be expensive. I mean, I think one of the main drivers behind reducing the number of MHKs is to actually cut costs. And if you want a total democratic society, you've got to be prepared to pay for it. I think one of the key issues is trust and respect, and that's something that we need to actually re-establish in the run-up to this next election, that the electorate have got the trust in our politicians or those who stand. And we, as the general public, I think have got to have the respect for politicians. I think in many ways that has gone, and hopefully we can re-establish that. I actually have great admiration for anybody that's prepared to put their head above the parapet and put themselves on the line, because there are aspects of the job where you will draw fire as a politician and people will behave in not appropriate ways to politicians. That's totally unacceptable.
Chris Holmes, and I'll bring in the members of the audience.
Well, I think we do have too many MHKs. I think the statement about this being perfect democracy was just wrong, essentially. We have MHKs who stand and get elected unopposed, which therefore people have no say, which is surely the worst kind of democracy, in fact, not a democracy. In 2001, 4 people got in unopposed. In 2006, sorry, the last one, Eddie Tier got in unopposed, and that's just not on. Essentially, the other
But
thing...
people could actually stand in that area if they wanted to.
Yes, they could, but there's an electorate of, what, 4,000 out of 4,000 people, the amount of people who want to be politicians anyway.
Well,
Is
more like 2,000 in there.
2,000
No, no.
So, out of 2,000 people, how many people are going to want to be members of Parliament, members of MHKs, members of SPs? It's going to be relatively small. I mean, no one's going to really want to take on that responsibility, and you can't ask people who already have other jobs to take on that responsibility. I also think that I'd like to see the introduction more of a party system in the Isle of Man, because say 5 people stand in Garth, I'm not going to be bothered to find out what they all stand for. I mean, I'm interested in politics, don't get me wrong, but finding out where 5 people's allegiances lie is a lot of effort.
It'll all be in the Isle of Man exam, don't worry.
Yeah.
I could bring in, I've got several hands. If I could bring in the gentleman with glasses on the 3rd row over here, please. And then the gentleman just in front.
My question is regarding the size, in terms of the number of MHKs we have, the size of the departments which we have. I think it's an issue that's been raised by some of the non-ministerial or non-departmental members of Tynwald, who have raised the issue of the fact that it's actually very easy for the government to pass things into law, because quite often they will go without any opposition, because they're always going to be outvoted.
Well, the reality is, of course, that we do have a party system. It's a one-party state by patronage, and we have a situation where, up to recently, I was the only person who didn't have a ministerial appointment apart from the bishop, as I say, and the bishop's supposed to be non-political. The problem is you've got too many MHKs. You need them doing effective roles, and what you want them doing is not licking stamps, not trying to supersede what the chief officers and the civil servants are doing, but actually creating the strategy, the long-term policy for the future well-being of the Isle of Man. And that's the problem you've got at the moment.
Right, we do need to move on. So if we have the gentleman here, please.
Yes, if the non-ministerial MHKs can't spend the time writing a counter-budget, what are they actually doing all day?
I think that's direction that you need to go.
Well, I think the situation is, I'm more likely the most hardest working member of the House, because the fact is the fact I have to try and read this stuff. Look at your House of Keys paper next week. 6 of the 7 questions are from me. On the bills, on both bills with amendments, I think I'm 100% of the bills that are actually having any amendments at all put to it. So when you look, I've got a private member's bill down. The problem that you've got to get away from is if you're a department member, you're a 30% man. If you're a statutory board member, you're a 40% man.
We've got the point.
And I think it's important that they realise that MHKs have got an important role to scrutinise legislation, and it's not happening. That's why you're getting the debt that's going to be put on your shoulders.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll take the gentleman there with the red name, Mrs. Craig, please.
I'm going back to a point that Richard made about it is more about the quality of MHKs, especially in an election year, and how much money is wasted from the taxpayer on reviews, on consultancy, bringing people across to look at something, when really we're electing MHKs to make the decisions. And to borrow any point, no one seems to be putting their head on the block at key times. They're hiding in the shadows, going, oh, I don't want to make my voice there, because I want to win the election next term to get in again. When really, we just need to stop wasting all this money on that Lang Nest. How much money's gone on that? Well, it's up to you guys, who we're voting for, to make that decision.
Final point, then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, just to say really, I agree with you to a certain extent about all the consultations that take place. That's the name of democracy, and people have to have their say these days, and we have to be, as Peter is often saying, accountable and transparent.
It's not
and that's
democracy, it's
unfortunately the way in which that goes. But if I could just go back to the point, do we have too many MHKs? Frankly, no. Do you have enough MHKs who work? That should be your question. It's about quality of
Thank you. Our next question is from Oscar Hill, please.
Is religion really dying?
Now, this is one of the early findings of the UK census, where one conclusion was religion was dying in parts of Wales and parts of England. Anne-Marie?
I don't believe that religion is dying, actually. Religion of various sorts. I think there is a tremendous strength out there these days. I think that when you're talking about the church as such, and the Church of England, then I think that as an organisation is veering from its path of religion and becoming more of a social centre. I went to church recently and found it very hard to actually be a member of the congregation because there was so much chatter and the boiling of a cup of kettle at the back there ready for refreshments. That wasn't going to church or participating in religion as I would choose to do. But I do accept that some people who go on a more frequent basis find that so. I think that accepting many and varied types of religion, I do think that more and more people are becoming involved in religion of different aspects.
Okay, Chris Hall, please.
Yeah, I look at this, I think, from a global perspective. So although there may be some problems in Wales, we're all global citizens. And if you look around the world, I think, obviously there's some very, very strong countries with very, very strong faiths. So I think it's a bit premature to say it's dying. I think we are living in a changing world, and obviously people have different lifestyles now, different ways we communicate. So I think perhaps what this is alluding to is the churches also have to change the way they communicate. Whereas the way it was done 100 years ago is great for some people, there are also other ways we can interact now. So I think perhaps what this may help the church in Wales do is sit down and think about how they can communicate with one of their customers effectively. So yes, it's changing a lot, but I don't think it's dying.
Thank you. Richard Bob, please.
I think, as Chris said, globally it's certainly not dying. We had recently a politician in Pakistan who was murdered because of saying things weren't quite as religious as other people wanted. You have people like Sarah Palin and every American who has to talk about the relationship with God and all that sort of stuff, and things that don't happen in Britain. I think that actually what's happening is that people are getting more answers from rational perspectives and seeing things like the Brian Cox programme about the universe. They actually think that, yes, actually the universe is 13.7 billion years old, it's not 6,000 years old, and they actually are having science are providing far more answers to them than supernatural sources. And I think actually, to be honest, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think people are actually more getting more intelligent answers and living a much more sort of intelligent life than perhaps they would have done by following a book.
Okay, thank you. Serina, please.
As humans, I think we're all really curious and we always want to find the answer to the next thing. In the past, the answer was religion, God. I think now with new scientific discoveries, we're realising there's a totally different world out there. There's so many, they've given us answers to things that we wanted to know. So I think what's really happening is that people are just finding answers from somewhere else. So it's dying, it's just what we believe in is evolving.
Okay, thank you. Chris Holmes, please.
I think in terms of the UK, Christianity, as it was a major player with House of the Bishops and House of Lords, and so an influence on politics, let alone every other aspect of life, is certainly becoming less powerful. And I don't think that's because people are becoming any less spiritual. I just think that people tend now to be brought up in a situation where they are not having religion, I don't want to say inflicted upon them, but they don't go to church when they're sort of 5, and you're too young to choose your religion at 5, but you still go to church because your parents do. So I think because that's happening less and less, people are not becoming any less spiritual in the fact that they believe there's something out there. They're just becoming less associated with Christianity, and that's what the census has reflected.
Okay, thank you. Andrew Shipper?
Right. There is a quote in the Bible, and I'm going to misquote it. It talks about pure religion, and it's to look after the widows and orphans and not to be stained by the world. I think one of the problems growing up in the Thatcher era was that we lost sight of what life is about in many ways, and money became the god that replaced the God. And we, unfortunately, we've lost sight of our compassion in general. I think what is decreasing is institutionalised religion that's losing its influence. I think there is a growth in spirituality which is evident from people's interests in lots of different cults and various other things which we see advertised in the paper. We've made reference to science, and I personally don't believe that science has all the answers. I'm a physicist, and I think you're still left at the end of the day with some fundamental questions. I am a Christian, I have a faith, and I believe that each one of us has a gap in our lives that we need to fill, and for me that is in my faith. I think unfortunately too many people have filled it with other things which are not appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Yes, if you can go back to the original question asked, please. Oscar Hill.
You made a point about how the science has all the answers and stuff, and that people aren't getting answers from a book. I reckon that's because most people haven't actually read the book themselves, so they haven't found the answers yet. And just because science is putting the answers out there doesn't mean that they're right.
Jump to the lady with the dark hair over in the corner. And then if we come down to the lady in the blue.
This is a question to Andrew Shipley, by your comment about people losing their compassion. Should we not be compassionate on the grounds that we are nice people instead of saying, I'm going to be compassionate because of God? Should we not want to be compassionate because I'm atheist and I would still take care of anyone in need? But that's not on the grounds of me wanting to get into heaven, that's on the grounds of me wanting to be a nice person.
I think you're right. It's difficult to actually generalise, but I would hope that someone who is religious does have that compassion for those who are weakest in society. And quite rightly, you're saying that we should all be compassionate. I think, unfortunately, we have, as a society, gone away from having a compassion for people generally. I was quite shocked in looking through the Pink Book, which the Treasury put together, about the number of covenants that are given for that people make to actually give money to different charities and so on. And out of our population of 80,000, I think there were only something like up to about 700 people that were actually giving by covenant. And the average sum was something like 160, 170 pounds. It's a disappointing level for such an affluent society, and we could actually be more compassionate.
Lady in the blue, please.
Hi, my children attend St Thomas's Church of England School, and I'm a Sunday school teacher at St Thomas's Church. I don't think religion is a dying breed, but I certainly do think it's the way, as everyone on the panel said, it's when you mediate it, when you can get it from the internet, you can read the book, you can learn it in school. There are different ways to learn about religion, and it's entirely up to each individual person which religion you want to be and where you want to go. But I can just say this for the younger audience. There is an awful lot of people going to church now than there was when I was their age.
Yeah.
And I think in a few years' time, our churches are going to be full of middle-aged people because our parents, their parents, are taking them regularly now. So in a few years' time, our teenagers will be our church.
Peter Cowan, you were here hearing that.
I think it's important to realise that the lady that was talking before about being an unbeliever, some of the most Christian people I know are humanists. I think it's important that we recognise that. We get mixed up between religion and faith. Religion's about control. It's generally about exploitation. Faith is what we need. We need the basic faith of Christianity. And that's the important thing. And I think that has been soiled to a large extent by people using religion for control, when that is not the way it should be in the first place. So I think it is important. Faith is the thing that we need. The religion is generally about control, about exploitation, but the faith is wonderful. And I always remember one of the previous bishops saying, there are many ways to get to the top of the hill.
If I can take a point from the lady with the dark hair, and then if we can come to the front row straight after, please.
Just a quick one. I think that you said that people should have faith in Christianity, so you're ignoring all the other religions there as well.
Well, I would say that the thing is, it's the core faith of these different religions. It's when they get into being controlled by a minority to exploit the majority, that's where it's wrong. Remember, it's only the early 60s since we stopped the ban on Catholics being policemen. You know, I mean, we've come a long way in 40 odd years, and the issue of your religion should be a non-issue. When I first started in politics, you needed the sponsorship of one of the big churches in my constituency to get elected. Today, it doesn't matter, and that's the way it should be. People should go to church for their faith, not for the social character or whatever. And we're going away from worship and money. That's the thing that the teacher was on about, and I think he's so right. There's more to life than just money, you know.
Okay, we'll take the final point from the lady in the front row, and then we'll move on to our next question, please.
Do you think it's important to increase the access to places of worship for other religions, including, so there's no synagogues or gurdwaras on the Isle of Man? Do you think it's important to increase this access?
There was a synagogue on the island. I think it's closed down. But we do have. I think we've got one or two actual churches, mosques on the island at the present time for our Muslim community. So there's been one in Douglas for the last 20 years, and I think it's important. As I said, the bishop's widow says there's many ways to get to the top of a hill. And it's when we all think that we've got God on our side instead of us having been on God's side. And that's the humility that you need. And that's where faith is more important than religion.
Okay, want to move on to our next question, which is from Caitlin Bradley.
Should the UK continue to be involved in Libya?
Should the UK continue to be involved in Libya? Chris Holmes.
Well, frankly, I think the UK should never have got involved in Libya. It's a conflict in which I can't see a resolution that is going to satisfy our ideals of installing a democracy where basically politicians get assassinated. Well, Iraq is the prime example of this. We've installed a democracy there at gunpoint of British troops, well, NATO troops. British lives are being put at risk, British money is being spent, which we simply don't have to spare in deep recession. And I think it's very hypocritical of the Westernized governments to call Gaddafi, in Liam Fox's, the Defence Secretary's words, a brutal dictator, after the UK has sat by for 40 years while he's been in power without any problem with selling him arms, selling him weapons, selling him riot control gear, which is now all being used against the citizens and troops of Britain and Libya respectively. And I just think, frankly, it was the previous government's willingness to deal with a quite clearly corrupt and horrific system of oppression in Libya that's the problem, not our involvement now.
Luff, please.
One thing we're all aware of is the UK government only does something if they're going to gain something from it. With Iraq in the 80s, well, this is America, but it's a westernized government. Iraq in the 80s, America decided to, help out Iraq, get rid of the Russians by giving them loads of Afghanistan, gave them loads of arms, and now they're against them. With Mugabe in Zimbabwe, he's doing the same thing that Gaddafi was doing, but Zimbabwe's got nothing that we want, it's not going to help them, but Libya's got some oil, so, we're going to try and sort something out there. I think the UK is just being really, really selfish. If you're going to help one person, help the rest of them.
Peter Karen, please.
Well, I think the situation is obviously it's a popular uprising. As a member of Amnesty International, I support any moves that helps to get human rights into anywhere in the world. I totally agree with the students that are on this panel. It's the hypocrisy. We have a situation like the Dalai Lama with Tibet, where they have been producing genocide for nearly 50 years now, and everyone has turned a blind eye to the horrific situation as far as China is concerned. So I can have every sympathy with the students in the Isle of Man. But I do think Libya is slightly different to Iraq in the fact that it is people who have uprised against Gaddafi's rule, and that's where the legitimacy comes in. I'm afraid that, unfortunately, it is sad that we're not ending up with a situation where we're doing something to help people in Zimbabwe, and I do think that the students are right as far as that's concerned. If there was oil there, just like in Tibet, maybe they would have done something about the horrendous human rights record that the Chinese government has inflicted on a peace-loving nation.
Yemen and Bahrain are the same. These are both countries which have risen up in the same way as Egypt and Tunisia did to try and get a legitimate government. In Yemen, over 100 people have been killed. 50 of them were killed by police snipers. That's just the government controlling people. The same in Yemen, 21 people have been killed, and that's just, it's just frankly wrong that the British government has decided that Libya, because of its oil, is worth democracy that these other countries aren't.
Thank you. Anne-Marie, please.
I would find it difficult to disagree with the comments that have been made. But one thing I do find difficult is to understand really what is happening out there, because we get reports of Gaddafi receiving support, we get reports of civilians who are rebelling, and who's to be believed? And what worries me is that the media all too often actually manipulates these things. And we've got suggestions of Al-Qaeda being in there, actually promoting the rebellion. And I regret that we are there, but I do question as to who is going to be proved to be right at the end of this. And I don't think, actually, that the media always gives us the right line of guidance.
Whoever wins will be right. I think that's how it works.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Okay, Chris Hall, and then I'll move to the audience, please.
Having said on the last question, we're all global citizens. I'd actually like to bring this one back to the Isle of Man. The question previously was, do we have enough MHKs or whatever? But the one thing here which is concerning is the low turnouts at general elections. So when I see this on the news, and you see the bloodshed, you know, the rights or wrongs, I just feel very grateful we're living in a democracy here, and I hope everyone will remember come the election in September to actually go to the ballot box and actually make sure that we use our vote to elect our democratically elected government.
The gentleman at the back there, please.
I don't think we should be in Libya because we've got the defence cuts that have just happened, and we're already, before the defence cuts, struggling in Afghanistan. We're not protecting our troops. So why should we go into Libya and put more risk on there and spread ourselves out even thinner and give less protection in Afghanistan when you could perfectly keep them in Afghanistan and leave Libya alone, because it's literally a war on oil. That's it.
I think it's slightly more than that. Sorry to interrupt. There was a situation where Gaddafi had come out allegedly and said that he was going to, his troops were going to move from house to house and actually pull people out and shoot them. Now, that puts the West, or the United Nations ultimately, in a difficult position, because you've got a situation where you've effectively got genocide going to be occurring. During the Bosnian War, we saw that genocide actually being perpetrated, and the world stood by and did nothing, and thousands of people were murdered. This time, I think they've actually possibly got it right in that they did actually seek legitimacy from the United Nations in Resolution 1973. It is a humanitarian intervention. They have specifically said that they are going to be actually ensuring that the citizens of Libya are protected. The risk is that people are going to be, or the various countries that are involved are going to be sucked in to a war on the ground. And that's where it changes from being the humanitarian intervention to being something completely different. And I think at that stage, we ought to draw the line and say, that's it.
I think that's the point, isn't it? That when Gaddafi's troops were edging in on Benghazi last week, it was quite clear that another Srebrenica was quite likely to happen, and we'd probably had another question tonight if the no-fly zone hadn't happened. So it's a difficult one to actually know what happened, because you have to guess what might have happened otherwise. I think the big problem that we've got is that the rebels are poorly armed. They're not an army. They are defending quite a small area of territory and are losing ground again earlier this week. And so what is going to happen in the end game? We will be there until Gaddafi is deposed, dies, or something else. We could be there for years. Who knows how long that would last? That's the problem we've got to. We've done impossible with the right motives to stop a Srebrenica sort of thing happening. But now we're there for a long, long time, and we don't know what's going to happen. And we also don't know very much about the rebels. They're actually, a ragtag group. We don't know what they're going to become. They could become another Mujahideen in Afghanistan, basically the father of the Taliban, or they could be a fantastic democracy. We don't know what they're going to be at the end of it. So the answer to the question is, I don't know whether the UK is right or not to do what it did. But I think I'm glad I wasn't the one who tried to make the decision.
We'll take a comment from a gentleman there, please.
I'd just like to make comments to a few on the panel. To Mrs. Crane, firstly, that propaganda and media coverage has been used in every war in the 20th century, so we can't really we've got to make our own decisions with what we see on the television. Point Andrew made there about the fact that genocide happened in the Kosovo-Serbian war. The fact is, it happened in Rwanda as well, but because there's nothing in Rwanda, the UN didn't go into Rwanda until it was too late. The point that Chris made earlier on about us going in there and stuff like that is, the problem is with Colonel Gaddafi in this case, as I agree with the panel, is he was going to wipe everybody out that opposed him. Whereas in the other ones, in the North African uprisings, they were confined to one city, and they were people who were peacefully there, and it was riot batons. It wasn't planes, it wasn't bombers, it wasn't tanks that were attacking the people. This is why I think that we have to be very careful to how we interpret the evidence that we're given.
Point from a gentleman.
Okay. I just wanted to raise a point with Chris concerning, it almost sounded like he was legitimising the use of snipers on his own people. Maybe I misunderstood you, but maybe you could just clarify that point for me.
Yeah, totally. All what I'm sure you spoke about in Yemen is that 50 people were shot by police snipers, which is totally wrong, of course. I wouldn't legitimise that in any way. But the point I was trying to make is they did that there and got away with it totally scot-free, which if you look at it in a governmental context, did our government let them get away with that scot-free? Whereas in Libya, he threatened, we went in there, admittedly at a bigger risk. He threatened to go door to door and shoot people, but in Yemen, people were shot as well. Why are we not inflicting a no-fly zone, doing the same, putting some similar bans on there as we are in Libya? That's what I was trying to make.
But I think the point is that heavy military weaponry was actually being brought to bear on a civilian town, and the problem is that unfortunately the West has actually sidled up to Gaddafi over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years or so on, and actually buddied up with him. Yeah. And the problem is we should have actually been planning for post-Gaddafi and actually seeking to actually get him out of power by democratic means. It is a popular uprising, but have we made contact with the rebels? It sounds like we haven't. It should have been in place. The resources of the West, of the United Nations, could have been brought to bear to actually make those contacts and develop them.
In response, we have made contact with them. We've got some sort of council they talked to us with, and what they've actually asked for is political help. Like, people talk about arming them. They've said, yeah, that would be good, but that's not what we're asking for. What they've asked for is they want political help and just other countries to support them and what they're actually doing.
Unfortunately, our time is almost up. We have time for one very quick question from Mr. James Aldridge, who I believe is sat up there. If the answers could be brief on this one, please.
Will the Isle of Man ever put a person on the moon?
This is a response to the fact that various bookmakers have the Isle of Man fifth favourite to put a man on the moon. I'm afraid you would be overseeing the finance of this, or what do you think?
Yes, undoubtedly, the Isle of Man will put a person on the moon. Give me the ticket, I'll go.
Chris Hall, briefly, if you would.
I agree with Anne. We have a fantastic space industry here, and there's quite a few people I'd like to send on a one-way ticket.
Andrew Shipley, you're a physicist.
Yes, I'd like to volunteer as being the first one. I think the industries that we've got are leading the way in the world even. And yes, please, first in the line.
Richard Buck, please.
I googled the other day who was the first woman in space, and I forgot her name. I bet nobody here knows it, do they? So let's let the irony say, let the Isle of Man put the first woman on the moon.
Peter Carron.
Well, I think the problem you've got is, as far as Tynwald's concerned, many of them are already living there.
Chris Holmes.
I hope for the sake of the budget we never do.
And finally, Serina Luff.
Why not?
And I'm afraid our time's up. I'd like to thank all our panellists for contributing. Andrew Shipley. The Honourable Anne Crane. Chris Hall. Serina Luff. Richard Butt. Peter Cowan, MHK. And finally, Chris Holmes. Thank you very much and good night.